Welcome to the second installment of a series of periodic reflections on my channel. I plan to use this as a kind of retrospection on my videos and their content, a way to respond to certain comments if I think they're particularly insightful or incorrect in an interesting way, and a place to share some insights of a more general nature, and on the channel's immediate future. If you haven't watched every video on my channel yet, I would highly recommend doing so, but if you'd rather just watch this, that's fine too. Do whatever works for you. The first video I want to talk about is my first reflection video, which covered my first two Heidegger videos and the quick meditation one. Oddly enough, that video got quite a few views for that time, which I find quite funny because it's so inherently dependent on videos that got less views than itself. Anyways, one of the concerns I voiced in that video was the use of gameplay in the background, since I found constructing videos in other ways to be pretty tiresome. I've found that I have a kind of aesthetic bias against videos that use gameplay as a background, because I see it as lazy, and it makes me want to discount what the person is saying. Unfortunately, this bias still influences my outlook, but I think I've come to recognize that for some certain videos, like my recent video on David Foster Wallace, short of doing a face cam or something, there isn't much else I can do at the moment if I want the video to be made. In that video though, there were a couple negative comments on the footage, ranging from my lack of skill to just outright hatred for the use of it. If anybody watching shares those sentiments, I can say that I am currently exploring alternate options, but it will likely still remain a necessity for the time being. That said, I've come around to editing somewhat. I just have to make sure the process is as streamlined and fun as possible. For instance, I had a lot of fun making the Existential Challenge of AI video. I see that as my best work so far, and it's also the one where I try to experiment the most with editing. That style of video, longer, denser, theoretical videos, will likely be the arena where I push my own video making skills forward. In that video, I also made an offhand reference to Heidegger's philosophy being more of a psychological exploration than an ontological one. And this is something that I didn't want to expand on for fear of being seen as wrong or something. Like, how could I characterize such a profound thinker in such a way? Especially since many others don't. I am just a mere small YouTuber after all. But after reading Nihil Unbound, I think I am more comfortable accepting this characterization. Ray Brassier found Heidegger to be a correlationist, and while I'm still a bit ambiguous on that term, I tend to agree that Heidegger massively privileges the human subject over the world, which honestly makes sense. Heidegger was a phenomenologist after all. Of course his philosophy would have a kind of psychological grounding. These are preliminary thoughts though. This line of thinking definitely warrants further investigation, and maybe I'll make a video about this someday. Overall, I like that I had the idea to do these reflections. I want my channel to be coherent, and I think this lends to that connectedness. I also never want it to seem like any video I make is the final say on the topic. I want to make my videos open implicitly to feedback and argumentative building. Speaking of that, while I won't specifically touch on the Minecraft video here, there was a fun and passionate comment from user Ivan-QK2M that offers some criticism of Heidegger's work that I found interesting. Go and check out that video and that user's comment if you have the time. For the Difference in Differences video, this is really an oddball in my current catalog. I'm not sure if I will ever make videos like this one again. I flirted with the idea of making a second channel for topics in math and whatnot, and I still might do that, and that's where videos like this would go in the future. I made this video as a kind of summary of what I had learned for myself about the Difference in Differences method, and I think it mostly succeeds in that regard, and as just an introduction to the topic. I think the LaTeX presentation heavily alleviates editing pressure, which can be seen in my next two videos on Pascal's wager, and I'm really happy with that format. However, in that video, I did not have a script at all. I basically ad-libbed the whole thing, and that makes it seem pretty sloppy to me. I'm not sure if it comes through in the video or not, but that's how I remember it. I tend to not recommend people watch that one unless they have a specific interest in it. Speaking of the Pascal's wager video, I think the LaTeX format worked very well for that, and I made sure to write a script for that to make it easier. This one also had some strange audio issues that haven't resurfaced since, so I'm not sure if I can do anything about it. I plan on buying a new microphone soon, and specifically making a better place to record. The impetus for the first Pascal's wager video really came from the realization that so far, most of my channel had been basically adapting other people's thoughts for media interpretation, or just straightforwardly presenting a theory. So I had the desire to basically submit some of what I thought were my own original ideas. For that reason, I did absolutely no research and just responded to an argument that had been used on me a lot by evangelicals. I like the style of it too. It reminded me of Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion. Comment-wise, I responded to the main criticism in the follow-up video, The End of Pascal's Wager. I'm also very happy with that video, and I think it's probably my second best video. I like the opening skit, the alpha set argument, and the more relaxed tone at the end. I don't really have much more to say on that video though. I then made my How to Get Started with Philosophy video, which, before I made it, I was very nervous about what people might think. I was worried that more hardcore philosophy nerds would raid the video in complete rejection of my points. Luckily, it seemed like most of the comments were from people who earnestly agreed with my points and even found them helpful. This was pretty gratifying to me. I tried to speak Polish for the opening skit I byłem bardzo zestresowany o mówieniu po polsku, ale polskie ludzie kochali to. This was a huge boost to my confidence, and actually started a bit of a learning fervor. I'm going to Poland later this summer, so I've been trying to learn more. Next was the Existential Challenge of AI video, which I think is my best work so far. I was happy with the script, though I did a lot of needless cutting that I might not do next time I have something like that. The biggest complaint I've gotten from people in my personal life is that the video is too dense, and more explanation in a few sections might have been nice. I think this is pretty fair, and I will try to do that more so in the future, though I am aware that too much explanation can make the video cumbersome and actually bury the argument further. There is no perfect answer, ultimately. In the comments, I got into a brief discussion with a YouTuber named AidenKnight1574, who makes his own interesting philosophy videos. I won't reprint the thread here, but Aiden's argument was essentially that characterizations of AI art as basically an advanced Google search kind of invalidate human-created collage art, since it's basically collections of what's already out there. This was an interesting point, and the discussion brought me to a place where I was really questioning the idea of human novelty in general. The complaint against AI is that it just indexes art that's already out there and remixes it to varying degrees. Thus, it's not really original or novel and is soulless. Aiden and I both disagreed on the face of it that AI art is soulless, because we had both had great personal experiences with it. As far as originality and novelty, I think that this is a foolish argument if only because it implicitly overstates the novelty or originality of human-created art. Humans don't create art ex nihilo. Every human has existed in some culture at some definite point in time, and thus inherited a lineage of art and ideas to which they added their own mark, which necessarily built on previous work. Even for the most controversial novel art, it still in some ways reflects the work of other humans. And this problem gets even worse when we focus on artists who aren't at the frontiers of style. If I commission an art piece from a middling second-year art student, I don't think many people would complain that the art is soulless because it was made with the blood, sweat, and tears of the student. However, as I just stated, they are a middling art student. They are very likely just recreating styles given to them in school rather than manifesting their own true talents or style, if such a thing exists. In other words, they are remixing and adapting already established skills and styles for a new image or work, in which case it's no different than an artwork from ChatGPT, other than the fact that the student's work took more effort and time. Basically, it seems to me that a lot of the hatred towards AI art reflects something of a humanity bias, where we praise things merely because they result from humanity, rather than just engage with the work itself. And, of course, we also have a bias towards things that took large amounts of time and effort to make. Another avenue that some commenters went down is to deny the power I gave to AI, or emphasize its challenge to humanity in economic terms, rather than existential terms. I have a couple thoughts about this. For saying I characterized AI as too powerful, I think this has some merit, but really only at the present moment. I was careful to say that AI will likely only be getting more potent, so if any of these things aren't affecting you right now, they may in the future. One of the comments acknowledged this point though, which leads me to the second thing I want to say. There was another general attitude that AI doesn't really cause an existential crisis. I think this arises from the inherent subjectivity involved in an existential crisis. People will have very different reactions to different things. and these reactions will heavily vary depending on your upbringing, your knowledge, your identity, etc. So I think this is a good thing to bring to the discussion because it highlights that some people genuinely don't seem to care that AI is better, and that's cool. Building somewhat on that line of thinking, there was a sense in a comment or two that the true danger of AI is more grounded and job displacement. I think my only issue with this is its characterization as the true danger. It's obviously a huge issue, and one that I definitely plan to explore further, if only for my own sake. But it is just one of many issues, even if it may be more pressing to more people in a sense. In general though, I think the discussion in that video was very productive, and most everyone brought something cool to the table. The points I just outlined really are less disagreement and more just my own perspective in regards to my video and the comments therein. I hope those same people contribute further to the discussion in this video. Alright, let's move on to the next one. The greatest danger to philosophy was just a short and fun video that I wanted to make in the interim of the AI video and the David Foster Wallace video. I don't have too much to say on it, other than that I think this video reflects a kind of trend that my channel seems to be taking, where I advocate for philosophical thinking as a very open but critical project. As for the David Foster Wallace video, when I wrote this script for the first time, that video had just been released, and it was doing okay, but didn't seem to be picking up steam. Then, in typical YouTube style, it randomly blew up. At time of writing, it has 4,700 views and counting, and seems to have launched my subscriber count from about 145 to 271. First of all, I want to thank everyone for subscribing, and I promise to do my best to continually bring worthwhile, interesting, and unique videos to you. Basically, the reception has been absolutely insane, and this was a huge surprise to me because, well, I didn't think people would care about David Foster Wallace that much, and even less so an hour-long dissection of what seems to be an essay that people think is boring and complicated if you read reviews for Consider the Lobster. The fact that people did tune in really changed my perception of YouTube viewership for the better. Most of the comments focused on the prescriptivism and descriptivism debate. One commenter made a very useful comparison to music composition, which is a field where prescriptive advice is really helpful. Even in the last 100 years where the trend has been to experiment and change, learning music is still a very prescriptive field. I love this comparison because it really highlights where prescriptive advice can be helpful. If you want to compose or write something better, with heavy air quotes around that, then definitely look up prescriptive advice. And music is a perfect field because prescriptive advice can be the difference between sublime beauty and dissonant refrigerator sounds, which unfortunately is the type of music I listen to because I'm stupid. The commenter ended there, but I want to emphasize that this doesn't mean prescriptivism is the end-all be-all of the field. Again, it has its own domain, whereas there's very clearly a realm for descriptivism. Ethnomusicology, for example, is a clearly descriptive field that strives to record different cultural examples of music. One records, one prescribes. They are different. One comment that I pinned emphasized the abuse allegations against David Foster Wallace. I mentioned the abuse allegations in one line very late in the essay, and my rationale for mostly excluding it was composed of two different ideas. One, I was mostly trying to critique the way that David Foster Wallace's style and personality, as it manifested in his writing, worked to obscure his argumentation and also foster a kind of unthinking cult status around him. Because the allegations didn't really relate to his writing, I didn't bring it up. Two, it felt a bit weird to me to use the abuse that someone suffered as a mere talking point in a video. These make sense, but I now think that not giving the allegations some more time in the video was a mistake, and I am grateful for that commenter for bringing that point up, and for continuing to defend the merits of talking about the abuse in the thread. I'd recommend reading that thread because it shows why we can't ignore things like that. I also want to specifically respond to two comments I got that offer some more general criticism. I find it thoroughly amusing that your rhetoric is to circumscribe, spotlight, and caveat multitude character attacks on DFW and his position, as if not willing to fully rhetorically be equivocal and instead claim a detached objectiveness, just like you claim it is bad for him to do in his own rhetoric, as if there isn't any other way to style one's own erudite rhetoric other than DFW was able to give an example to show us how. I can see where this comment is coming from, when you push through the style of it. While it wouldn't invalidate the points I make in the video at all, it would be genuinely funny if I unintentionally mimicked David Foster Wallace's own style in a video where I critique his use of it. However, I do disagree with this comment, and I will explain why. For one, the comment says I make multitude character attacks on DFW and his position. I don't think I make character attacks, more persona attacks, but honestly I don't care so much about that here, and if you think I did this, that's okay with me. I highlight this more to say that there's no such thing as a character attack on someone's position. Someone's position is not part of their character, and thus attacking someone's position and the arguments they make is not a character attack. It's just how philosophy and argument proceeds. But more generally, this comment seems to misunderstand the point I was making. I don't think it's wrong to use a detached, objective POV. I think it's wrong to do this when the tone and style of objectivity obscures what is an inherently biased and completely non-objective argumentative position. I think it's good to try and be objective, but as can be seen from David Foster Wallace's writing as exemplified in that essay, it's easy to think you're being objective or portray yourself as being so when you're definitely not. Plus, while I tried to stay objective regarding the argumentative core and attempted to outline a clear place I think prescriptivism can occupy, the video was literally titled, "This essay made me hate David Foster Wallace." I was very upfront with my frustration, especially in the last section. Not exactly objective. So yeah, I don't care about style itself. Be as stylistic as you want to be in your writing, but if you use your style to try and obscure the fact that what you're making is a philosophical argument, then I have a problem with that. The comment also states that I use the same erudite rhetoric as David Foster Wallace. First of all, thank you for thinking I'm erudite. Obviously, the problem with this is that, again, the comment thinks I critique erudition generally, when my real problem was with how the erudition manifests in David Foster Wallace's writing. He throws out name after academic movement, after philosophical trend, after name, with almost nothing in terms of content attached to it. It feels like David Foster Wallace is making a very base form of appeal to authority, relying on the pedigree of a name, rather than genuinely lending his arguments support by quoting established authorities or norms. And there's even a difference in how we quote things. David Foster Wallace doesn't steelman his argumentative opponents. He responds to the briefest, least formulated positions, and barely gives any weight to the much needed context for the quotes he does use. I did my best to always provide context for the quotes and references I made, and responded to the best and most fully formulated arguments of David Foster Wallace's position. So yeah, I disagree with this comment heavily, and I do think it is wrong, and where David Foster Wallace would also have to clarify that the commenter is not crazy or stupid, I will do no such thing because obviously they aren't. In fact, they point out, a little smugly, something useful that we as viewers should always be looking out for. That being, if someone making an argument is living up to their own ideas, and if not, why, and whether or not it affects how we should receive their ideas. The last comment I want to take a look at is this one. I think David Foster Wallace is jesting upon the reader, being extreme, hitting people over the head with James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. To take a single work of a writer and define the dynamic thinking of a living person is fundamentally to not grasp what Marshall MacLuhan at the University of Toronto teaches about James Joyce and the English language. David Foster Wallace is slamming the entire world with the Tower of Babel metaphor in the mind. He is going around and around Finnegan's Wake without naming it. I'll be honest that I have never read Finnegan's Wake and don't really want to because had a kid scad but ended a bland old Isaac. Were Sozi Sester's wrath with Twone Nathanjo? The fuck? Nor have I encountered Marshall MacLuhan before. I asked ChatGPT and did a brief bit of reading, and from that, the understanding I'm operating on is that this commenter thinks David Foster Wallace's essay is a linguistic performance more than an argumentative essay, that the true content or message of the essay is its form rather than the specific points he makes, if he even makes any points at all under this understanding. So basically, this commenter thinks that I am attacking David Foster Wallace on grounds that he doesn't understand himself to be on, because he is intentionally overwhelming the reader, making them the butt of a literary joke. rather than literally arguing for something. They also contend that it's dishonest to go from a single work to then characterize the author's thinking as a whole. Unfortunately, that is the best I can grasp from this comment because, just like David Foster Wallace does in his essay, the commenter references a bunch of random stuff without explaining what that stuff is, what it says, and how it connects here. Maybe the commenter is doing the same thing that they claim David Foster Wallace does, and so I shouldn't really take it seriously, but it's clearly framed in response to my very literal argument as trying to point out something I'm misunderstanding. So I think it's at least fair to expect a bit more detail. Like, why be obscure if you already think I got lost in David Foster Wallace's obscurity? While I do reference more than just authority in American usage, I quote This Is Water, and I did read the rest of the essays in Consider the Lobster, I can admit that it's understandable if any viewer is a bit skeptical of the broader arguments I make at the end, given the brevity of my list of citations. After all, I haven't read anything besides Consider the Lobster and This Is Water, so it's certainly possible that my broader characterizations may be slightly off or are missing context. I tried to safeguard against this by having my friend, a David Foster Wallace superfan, read my essay before publishing, but that's not really a replacement for doing the work myself. So if anybody has any extra insight from his other writings that they think may be constructive, I'd love it if you could share them in the comments. And I will read more David Foster Wallace, because again, I did tend to enjoy his writing, and if I come across enough stuff that points in the opposite direction, I'll try to make a follow-up video. However, I still disagree with the wider comment because it rests upon an assumption that David Foster Wallace was trying to perform a linguistic bit in authority in American usage, and thinks that if that's true, then David Foster Wallace is excused or at least sheltered from the criticisms I make. To the first point, I don't know of any place where David Foster Wallace explicitly stated that it's a performance. Again, this would be a fantastic time to share this in the comments if you know of any places where he said this. It's clear that David Foster Wallace has a unique style and loves to revel in it, but that's far from stating that his style is the content of his work. The comparison to Finnegan's Wake specifically shows why I'm skeptical of this argument. Finnegan's Wake is experimental fiction. Authority in American Usage is a non-fiction book review published in a magazine and then republished in a collection of other partially argumentative essays. To me, it's just weird if this is your medium of choice to abandon content and embrace performance. But sure, maybe this is true, and this all assumes that the author's intent really matters here at all. Even if it is though, this in no way excuses David Foster Wallace from my criticisms. In fact, it kind of enhances the grounds of my disagreement. First, I still certainly have the right to attack his arguments, stylistic gibberish or not. The form of an argument, or the intent behind the statement of it, doesn't suddenly protect that argument from criticism. Secondly, my second line of argumentation in the video already pointed out how David Foster Wallace used style to obscure argumentation. Saying that argumentation is unimportant doesn't change the fact of his style's obscurant function. In fact, one of the possible interpretations of my video is that I am arguing against this exact style over substance type of work. Saying that style over substance is exactly what his work is doesn't really help David Foster Wallace out much. And even if everything I just said is false, I still think it's important for me to make these points, if only as a safeguard against other people falling victim to his weak reasoning, thinking that the essay isn't a performance piece. Many people read it just like I did, or similarly enough, to where the points I make may be useful. Basically, if the essay wasn't an argument, then my video should protect against the consequences of people treating it as if it were one. So, I think that comment contains part of a fair criticism, is unfortunately vague and hard to understand what they are saying, and if I and ChatGPT read it correctly, think that David Foster Wallace is making a joke, meaning that I shouldn't question the value of that joke. As of the time of writing, there isn't anything else I want to address with the David Foster Wallace video, so I'll start to wrap up. So far, my channel is very small, but I'm incredibly happy with how well it's going so far. For next steps, I have a few ideas on future videos. A big one on the horizon is going to be a philosophical exploration of silence, noise, busyness, and attention. If you struggle with watching YouTube videos every second of the day, it may be a good one for you. I see it as a kind of tangential follow-up to my AI video, if only in spirit. It stands to be an interesting and educational experience, and I hope you'll check it out and engage with it when it releases. I have a relatively short video on David Hume, and a huge mistake he makes in an enquiry concerning human understanding that should come out quite soon. As a genre, I really like cosmic or Lovecraftian horror, and I have some ideas that I have been working on in that space. There are a couple silly, stupid, satirical ideas I have for videos that should be fun to watch. I won't spoil anything about those, but you'll know them if and when you see them. My other ideas are much less defined and depend on my own future reading. Likely future topics will be Heidegger, Nietzsche, Zapffe, Brassier, Mayasu, Lao Tzu, Hume, maybe Metzinger, maybe Ligotti, maybe some Wittgenstein. Who knows though. Again, I have to do more reading, research, and thinking, and because of that, my rate of video production will likely slow down somewhat, as I have to do more preparation for the videos to actually get made. Plus, I am moving soon, have a trip to Poland planned, and I'm moving into the dissertation phase of my PhD program. Things are heating up on all fronts, but that just means it's an exciting time to subscribe and stay on the lookout. With that said, thanks for watching.